This episode is brought to you with support from PerfectDailyGrind.com. Perfect Daily Grind, your source for coffee education, articles, videos, and more, from the farm to the cup.
So far in this series, we've learned a good deal of coffee history that either clarifies today's price crisis or at least puts it into proper historical context. If you're like me, you've thoroughly enjoyed these episodes on coffee history, but maybe you're struggling to see the point. Today, that history becomes a little more concrete with a guest from an organization with ties deep in coffee price history. The organization is known as the International Coffee Organization, and our guest is its current executive director, Mr. Jose Set. Mr. Set, welcome to the show.
Hello, Coffee Podcast. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Excellent. So, Jose, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up in coffee?
It's a long story, Jesse. I graduated from university a long time ago, in 1978. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. My father was a diplomat, but I really didn't want to follow in his footsteps. I was attracted by international affairs, but I only really liked the multilateral side. And I really wouldn't have made a good diplomat. But I had the opportunity to work in the Brazilian Coffee Institute, which no longer exists.
Okay.
Was the government agency in Brazil dedicated to the regulation of the Brazilian coffee sector. And there, since I spoke English well, I was involved in international relations, contacts with other countries, and especially with the ICO. So right from the beginning of my career, the ICO was already in the picture.
Okay.
At the end of the 70s, it was a time when the ICO played a very big role in regulating the coffee market by setting export quotas, and it was very exciting for someone as young as I was.
So you were there early on in the early days then, already interacting with the ICO.
Well, the ICO was founded in 1963, so it had been in existence for more than 15 years when I turned up. But as I said, it was quite an exciting time, smoke-filled rooms, deciding the destinies of the world coffee sector instead of the free market. It's different times.
Different times for sure. So what is your story of the journey to the position you're in today? You're the executive director of the ICO. How did you end up there? I know you've been in this position before. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
This will be my 40th year of my professional career, most of which has been spent in coffee in one way or another. I think a particularly fruitful time that really helped to shape my outlook was my work in the trading department of one of Brazil's largest coffee exporters. This is the late 1980s and early 1990s. So this gave me a really interesting outlook on the workings of the private sector. But I've also spent the time outside coffee. I worked for 5 years in the Inter-American Development Bank, which is a leading multilateral development agency, and also in various trade associations outside the coffee. So all of these experiences gave me a valuable perspective and helped me with my current work. And in 2007, I came to work at the ICO for the first time. I was the head of operations, which is the number 2 post in the organization, from 2007 to 2013. And towards the end of that, I served for 1 year as acting executive director.
And you're back in that position today as the executive director, correct?
Yes, since May of 2017.
So you've seen a lot of coffee history happening almost just right before your eyes, and with access to really a lot of information concerning how the markets are moving and what's going on a more statistical and specific data-driven level. Is that correct?
You're making me feel old, Jesse.
My apologies. I'm not, not trying to do that to
Technically,
you.
I've been around for a while, yes.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about the past and the future. Let's talk about this coffee price crisis that we find ourselves in today. So the ICO seems all too familiar with the crises in coffee. How does the current coffee price crisis hold up to crises from the past?
Just before I answer your question, let me just my last professional appointment before returning here to the ICO in 2017 was I was executive director of the International Cotton Advisory Committee, which is the equivalent of the ICO but for cotton. And this was a very enriching experience for me. There are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences also. And the difference really goes towards answering your question. Cotton is an annual crop. Every year, the grower plants seeds and it springs up and it's harvested. So when prices are bad, then the grower switches quite, it's not as easy as it sounds, but switches to other crops like wheat, like corn, whatever. Mm-hmm. Now, coffee those are annual crops. Coffee is a perennial crop. It's a tree crop, and that's a very different proposition. Tree crops, once you plant your tree, it will remain productive for, 20 years at least. Mm-hmm. And I always like to compare it to a marriage which you can't, is hard to get out of. Once you have planted the tree and it's producing, to cut down the tree just because prices are low is a big step to make. So people, instead of actually switching crops, they reduce the care they take of their plants. They use less fertilizer, less inputs in general. Now, all of this makes the reaction to prices, whether low prices or high prices, there's a big lag inbuilt to the reaction. And this is what we're really seeing right now. Prices have been falling for more than 2 years, and so far the supply really hasn't gone down to match the low prices. And so coffee is a cyclical product because of these characteristics as a perennial crop. It's very different from an annual crop. Now, what we're going through today is a typical cycle in terms of the severity. I would say it's not as severe as the one we experienced in 1999 to about 2004, when prices fell below 50 cents per pound. But despite this is a very serious crisis, and many producers, especially ones with higher costs and lower productivity, are facing a very tough situation.
I see. So sort of my follow-up question to that was, how does the ICO view the current situation? Is this just a historic bump in the road, so to speak, or is this a more serious matter pointing to deeper problems in coffee?
Well, part of the answer is that this is a commodity cycle, a coffee price cycle. But this is no excuse for us to just throw up our hands and do nothing and just think that the cycle will eventually turn up. We have to bear in mind the figures vary, but as many as 100 million people all over the world depend on coffee for at least part of their livelihoods. And the coffee growers, and here I'm talking especially about the smallholders, they are the most vulnerable link in the coffee value chain. So times like this, these are opportune moments for all the links in the coffee value chain to reflect in a spirit of shared responsibility on the distribution of benefits within the sector. And I think here the figures speak for themselves. The total value of the world coffee sector is estimated at around $200 billion a year. I would put it at even higher than that. Of this 200 billion, producing countries receive about 20 billion. And if we look at the investments of the industry in sustainability initiatives, they are considerable, but they've been estimated at about $350 million. So the numbers, I think, are pretty stark.
Okay. When you say stark, what do you mean exactly?
Well, it doesn't seem to be a very balanced situation. Especially when you look at it from the grower's perspective.
Sure.
The solutions are not simple, but I think we all have to come together, like I said, in this spirit of shared responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Try to make sure that all the participants in the value chain are decently remunerated.
I want to ask you a technical question. It's not really in our line of questions that we're going to cover. But when you say smallholder, do you have a technical definition for that?
Depending on the country, this varies.
Okay.
In Brazil, where the properties are relatively large, I would think anybody under 10 hectares is considered a smallholder. But
Okay.
for most countries, the figure is much lower than that. So we're talking about 2 hectares, 1 hectare, something in that kind of range.
Got it. My following question is a question about the report that y'all recently released. It's available on your website, and we'll link to it. But this is actually, it's an indicator that is used all the time called the ICO composite indicator that is used to explain situations in the market. So what is this indicator, and why is it important to pay attention to it?
The ICO composite indicator is I think the longest running continuous price series of coffee available. And there are other series available, but they relate to futures prices, which are not always reflective of actual transactions. The ICO indicator is a different animal. It is based on transactions of physical coffee. So every day, at the end of the day, we have agents that call up brokers, importers, traders, and ask them the prices of various different varieties, very different coffee types during the day. So we have agents both in the U.S. and in Europe. In the U.S., it's basically New York, and in Europe, we have agents in Germany and in France. And so all of this data is collected. It is we run statistical tests to make sure it's reliable and consistent, and then we produce the indicator price. So the indicator price, there's one composite indicator, which is kind of an average of the entire market, and there are indicator prices for different groups of coffee: Robusta, the Brazilian Naturals, other milds, and Colombian milds.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's helpful because, as a sort of a lay person, I'm in coffee, but I don't understand the technicalities or the technical aspects of some of these reports. And so it's helpful to have that explained in a way that our listeners can now go and they can look at that report and have that in mind as they're looking at it. So thank you for going through that. And you kind of mentioned earlier we're in the second consecutive year of surplus. What does that mean on the ground for the global coffee market?
Well, it means low prices, and that is really the focus of our attention right now. Low prices, they discourage investment in the sector, and they are really a herald of problems in the future. And as a result, we are engaging in what we call a structured sector-wide dialogue, which tries to bring a very broad range of stakeholders, of coffee stakeholders together. So apart from our primary, sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Siren. But apart from our primary stakeholders, who are governments, we are an intergovernmental organization. We are bringing together producer associations. We are bringing together roasters, traders, NGOs, trying to get a broad range of minds together to think about possible solutions, or at least ways to mitigate the crisis.
I see. What would be some of the conferences that you're associated with?
We hold 2 regular meetings a year. But as part of this dialogue, we have already organized 5 different events from March till today. And the culmination of this process, where we really want to get to, is during our annual meeting in September. We are organizing what we call a CEO and Global Leaders Forum, where we want to get very high-level representatives to not only discuss the issues, but to come away with some concrete commitments in terms of actions to improve the situation.
I see. Okay. Yeah, sort of get all the decision makers in the room and have them make commitments to improve or to mitigate the issues in the coffee sector.
Exactly.
Got it. Well, let's move a little bit more, you might say, deeper into the conversation and move towards economic sustainability of coffee has been one of the key conversations. It's what this series is built around on this podcast series. So the ICO is aimed to facilitate coffee sustainability by overseeing the international coffee agreements. Like, for example, the ICA of 2007 had elements of this. What do you think? Is coffee economically sustainable in its current state?
I think we have to, as Jack the Ripper used to say, we have to do things by parts.
What? I've never heard that one. That's good.
It doesn't translate well. It's from Portuguese saying. But let me get back to the...
Right on, yeah.
The coffee sector is not homogeneous. There are some highly efficient producers with high yields, and low costs. And here I would especially point to Brazil and Vietnam. And there are some other countries that have quite high costs, whether it's because of their topography, the places where it's very mountainous. These are hard to mechanize any of the farming activities. Anyway, so there's a big difference in productivity. The people who are more efficient at these price levels, they are hurting, but they are not hurting enough to where they will be driven out of the market.
I see.
Now, other higher cost producers, depending on their situation at these price levels, it's not a good place to be in because of like I said before, the perennial nature of the coffee tree. It's hard for them to switch in the short term, but eventually they will switch. And I have a friend who says that the only cure for low prices is low prices. And this is a bit of a harsh kind of a sentiment, I think. But it's true in the sense that the market mechanism has to really be the driver here in terms of who grows coffee and who doesn't. But that doesn't mean that that there aren't a lot of things we can do to improve people's situations. And here I'll just go through a few, but we have to focus on increasing productivity. We want to help farmers to diversify their income. So not that they should give up planting coffee, but they should intercrop with other interesting agricultural products. We needed to drive towards the premiumization of coffee, the specialty market, to try and have more and more coffee sold as a specialty. We need to make the market more efficient and transparent, and that is one of our main objectives by these price series, by the economic studies we produce. All of these are intended to shed light on various aspects of the situation we find ourselves in. And so that is another part. We have to, I think, promote consumption also. This is very important. Coffee consumption worldwide, if we take an average, grows about 2% a year. But that is, there are very big differences among the markets. In a market like Europe, this is basically a mature market, and the overall consumption volume, in terms of volume, grows at a slow rate in line with the increase in population. It's basically a saturated market. Other regions, and here I especially like to point out Asia. Asia is a really promising market. It is growing somewhere almost to 5% a year. And here, I think the big drivers are the increasing disposable income, and also the influence of Western culture. It's coffee for them is an aspirational drink. People in China go out on a date and take their lady friend to Starbucks. So we are in very different situations depending on where we are regionally. Here, I think we have one kind of a big mystery for me, which is the USA, which really should behave similarly to Europe. Coffee has been around the US for a long time. People know about coffee, but in recent years, the volume of consumption has grown quite significantly, and we would like to study the reasons for that.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm drinking more coffee than ever, so
Well,
I've contributed for sure.
good for you. The just for clarification, the market in Europe is a growth market. It's a growth market in terms of value because people are consuming more and more high value products, especially pods. Pods are very the markup on pods is very big.
Hmm.
But the US seems to have the best of both worlds. It is growing in terms of value, it's diversifying. You have this tremendously vigorous specialty coffee segment, these new forms of preparation like cold brew, all these nitrogen infusions, things like that. But at the same time, the US is growing in terms of volume also, which is a very encouraging sign for us.
Well, there we go. And that's a positive impact on the price of coffee for the producer. Is that right?
In the long term, yes. I always like to, when people show discouragement with the current situation, I always point to this, what we just talked about. The long-term future is bright, but getting from the short term to the long term is a bit complicated, and it's a bit hard to see the forest for the trees right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't you think that message is really important for the industry? If you truly believe that the future of coffee is so bright, I feel like that would be a key message. Obviously, with supported facts and data, but I feel like that message would be key to mitigating the effects today. Don't you think?
Yes, I think we industry has to look with very warmly towards the promotion of consumption. And in most cases, the companies prefer to promote their own brand. And I think this is very understandable. But I think that in some instances, in some markets, especially markets that are not fully developed, and here especially markets in coffee-producing countries, with the exception of Brazil, there is merit in trying some approaches in terms of a generic promotion of coffee. But this is a complicated discussion, and like I said, most companies prefer to focus on their own brands
Right.
rather than generic promotion.
I have a question for you, the listener. What do you personally make of the obviously difficult and complex dynamic of economic mechanics like price, supply, and demand, and its implications on real people like generational small coffee farmers? I'd like to hear your thoughts and give you a real place to share them. I'm personally still landing that plane in my own mind. I'd like for you to reach out to me, and I will select a few of these perspectives on our next episode before the interview. Send me an email at hello@thecoffeepodcast.org and use the subject, My Thoughts. If you'd rather do it on Instagram, that's fine. If you want to stay anonymous, please just let me know. I think what is important here is putting our minds together. Working together, as Jose mentioned, with his suggested collaborative consumption campaigns for private companies. I look forward to hearing from you. Remember, you can find discounts and further insights on the podcast in our email newsletter. The discounts are mostly fantastic books right now, but I hope to connect with other brands soon to bring you discounts on a variety of coffee things. Music is by Michael Parallax. I'm Jesse Hartman. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, and until next time, happy brewing.